The Walt Disney Company has found itself in hot water over the past couple of years, mainly because I think parents and families and just individuals in the United States and across the world are engaging in a soft boycott, is what I'm calling it. Basically, they're finding other means to spend their money rather than spending money with the Walt Disney Company because the Walt Disney Company is prioritizing the message, whether that be socio-political, whether that be gender identity, whether that be sexual orientation, whether that be something like environmentalism. They are pushing the message in all of their products and all of their theme parks, everything that they are trying to do rather than trying to entertain. And Bob Iger recently addressed a lot of this in a recent appearance at the New York Times' Deal Book Summit just this past week. So let's get into this here. But before we get into that, please, if you want to see more of our coverage of Bob Iger and the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios and the best in entertainment, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications. With that out of the way, let's get into this here. I wrote this over at That Park Place earlier this week. Disney CEO Bob Iger discusses how the company will weigh in on political issues, completely undermines any kind of moral position he tries to make. So, one of the biggest positions that the Walt Disney Company took was they decided to embroil themselves in public scandal in the state of Florida by opposing a bill that stops the grooming of children in sexual orientation and gender identity between the grades of kindergarten and third grade. Iger discussed the company's positions and how it will act during the New York Times' Deal Book Summit. You can watch the video there if you want to after this video in the over at thatparkplace.com. He initially talked about a bevy of other topics from the environment to immigration to terrorism. He said, when it comes to taking positions about issues, I have tried really hard over the years, and I'm not calling them politics because a lot of them are not politics. It's sometimes what is right and what is wrong. When it comes time to taking positions, I have tried really hard to apply a standard that asks, is this relevant to the company, to our people, to our company, to our shareholders? That's a very important test. So if we take a position on the environment, we care about the health of our planet, it's because we believe that if the planet is not healthy, it will be bad for our business. He then explained people are not going to go to theme parks if they can't breathe the air, for instance. That's not politics, that's business. So if anyone is accused us of being political when it comes to that, they're just dead wrong. I think his example here is just absolutely wildly egregious. The idea that their environmental activism has something to do with air pollution, I think, is utterly ridiculous. I think it has more to do with the fact that they're getting tax subsidies, probably from the United States government, than anything else. And that is why it is probably good for business, because they're getting government tax subsidies and checks and grants and all those other kinds of things when they embrace these policies, whether or not it has anything to do with having clean air to breathe when you go to a Disney theme park. So I think he's just completely just like lying straight out of his mouth here. But that's my opinion. You can leave yours in the comment below. He went on and admitted that the company heavily relies on immigrants for their workforce. He said, interesting to listen to the vice president about immigration. He's talking about Vice President Kamala Harris, who also appeared at the Deal Book Summit and spoke about immigration in an earlier panel. He went on and said, we have over 200,000 employees. We rely on a workforce that is talented, motivated, interested in working for our company. The more diverse it is, the better off we are, the more experienced. And so a robust immigration policy is actually something that is pro-business for us. As a for instance, I really don't know how that is pro-business. He doesn't really explain why. I guess that they're supposedly making more profit by having this more talented workforce that is coming from overseas rather than the United States. I guess that kind of tells you what he thinks about people that are working in the United States. He doesn't think that they're very talented or potentially don't work as hard, can't do better. Really telling what he's saying here. Again, I think he's just lying, and he's just trying to obfuscate what the real issue is with the Walt Disney Company. He then went on and said, there are times there are subjects that maybe we should not comment on because they're not relevant unless they are of such importance to the world. For instance, commenting on terrorist attacks is perfectly reasonable for the CEO of a large company. It's interesting when you think about the world and who people listen to and what they expect of leaders. I just think there's a time and a place for companies to weigh in on issues. And it's actually something that I think CEOs get paid to do. We have to make decisions like that. I'm not going to disagree with him on this here, but I think he's obviously making the wrong decisions for the Walt Disney Company. I think that he has a very poor moral compass, and he really doesn't know what he's doing. I don't even think he's a very good businessman in general, and he's probably kind of ridden off the coattails of other better businessmen, especially things like that he's previously acquired and people who previously had the position of the Walt Disney Company. He hasn't really built anything himself. He's more been a guy who acquires things and puts them in a trophy case and then says they're his rather than actually building anything. In fact, if we look at his track record, he has done more to destroy things that he has acquired than he has done to make them bigger and better. He then specifically addressed the company's position in Florida. He said, "The position that we took with Governor DeSantis in Florida was simply this. The company, while I was gone, decided to take a position against and I added this, falsely labeled Don't Say Gay bill that was moving through the Florida legislature. It had nothing to do with not saying the word gay. It had all to do about stopping predators from instructing children on sexual orientation and gender identity in grades kindergarten through third grade. But he won't say that because the truth, he doesn't want people to actually know the truth and realize how immoral he truly is on this. So he's going to try and couch it in some kind of moral position about not saying gay, which even then it's not really a moral position because you're still looking at a disordered behavior that is not natural and is indeed a sin if you take action on that behavior. He went on and said, I won't comment on what I would have done or not done, but the company took that position against it. Well, you did comment on what you would have done. We saw that back in February 2022. This is what you wrote on X. I'm with the president on this. If passed, this bill will put vulnerable young LGBTQ people in jeopardy. So clearly, he was trying to get the company to actually oppose the bill. He was saying it himself. So we know what action you would have taken, Bob Iger. The action the company did indeed take. Now you're trying to say that you wouldn't take, or you don't even want to comment on what action you would have taken. Interesting that you don't comment on that, right? Nevertheless, he continued. The governor decided he got very, very angry at the company when it took that position and decided to punish the company by basically stripping it of. Well, first he wanted to strip essentially the entity that manages the property that Disney World is on. Then he decided that was impractical, so he would just take out the board and put his own board in. We felt that was a direct result of the company having exercised its right to free speech, taking the position against the Don't Say Gay bill, and that punishing us for exercising our right to free speech was anti-American and anti-business. And I felt that it was really important for us to stand up for our rights and simply ask the question. Despite claiming everything had to do with the falsely named Don't Say Gay bill, Iger then claimed it had nothing to do with it. He said it wasn't about the Don't Say Gay bill at that point. Well, that's literally what you've been saying for the past like 2-3 minutes here. But nevertheless, he goes on and said it was about, does the company have a right to free speech? And if it exercises that right to free speech, it should not face a retribution because it has done. And that's what we thought was going on. So there's a lawsuit that we filed that is very specific to that. Interestingly enough, Bob Iger has been pushing this narrative that he's just speaking his free speech. Again, he's trying to couch his immoral actions as moral. Like, oh, I'm just expressing my right to free speech as if wanting to have gender identity and sexual orientation being taught to students in kindergarten through third grade is somehow a moral prerogative and is speech that should indeed be allowed. Utterly ridiculous. It is immoral, disgusting, and sickening. But anyways, he has tried to kind of push this. Oh, I'm just free speech. We're just trying to express our free speech. Well, that argument has blown up in his face, and it's likely going to blow up in his face with this ongoing lawsuit. I have an inkling that it is going to backfire on him. And in fact, we have this analyst from Andrew Esquire, who has the Legal Mindset channel over here on YouTube. He says, Disney was never punished for that. RCID is not Disney. Once again, this is what he keeps doing, Bob Iger, and he's done it once on a previous call, and now he's doing it again. He's saying, they punished us. What did they do to you, Disney? They actually did nothing to Disney directly, nothing. Okay, they changed the district, but the district isn't Disney. You'd have to certify that. So either you're confessing to securities fraud and saying that the entire time you were Disney, so there's tax fraud, securities fraud, a bunch of Florida crimes that have been broken. But this is what you are saying here. If you're saying you're RCID, well, yeah, there's going to be issues there, but this is not the worst, and this is not where he digs himself in deeper. So clearly, there is a legal case against what Bob Iger is doing. He's trying to spin this in the PR as like he's been somehow being persecuted for expressing his free speech. It's just simply just not true. Iger would go on to then explain his decision on why the company stopped advertising on the social media platform X, run by or owned by Elon Musk. He said, by Elon Musk taking the position he took in quite a public manner, We just felt that the associated with that position and Elon Musk and X was not necessarily a positive one, and we decided we would pull our advertising. He then revealed the seemingly moral decision to pull advertisements is not one at all. We are now allowing entities at the company to use X as a platform to communicate. ABC News is a good example of that. ESPN another. So that begs the question about all of this stuff that he's kind of talking about here. If indeed he was taking some kind of moral opposition to what Elon Musk had to say on X and has pulled advertising, why has he not pulled all of the company's assets from the social media platform if it is so egregious? Doesn't really make any sense and doesn't really seem to be an actual principled stance. And that calls into question everything he said previously, whether those are actual moral decisions that he is making. And I think it's very easy to see that they are not. They are not moral decisions at all, which he's been trying to crouch himself as taking the supposed moral high ground. Obviously, anyone who has a really strong, good moral compass realizes that everything he's kind of doing is the opposite of what he's trying to position it as. So, Iger's revelation about X shows that none of the political statements that the Walt Disney Company makes have an ounce of credibility. The idea that the decisions he's making are good for business can clearly be seen by the fruits that they have borne. Just looking at the month of November, the company has torched around $500 million on just the Marvels and Wish at the box office. Shows on Disney Plus are seeing less viewership than shows that released back in 2020 when the streaming service had less subscribers. Merchandise sales are in decline. Theme park attendance was reported to be in decline back in July as well. If the decision to suspend advertising on X was truly done out of a sense of morality, Iger would have had all Disney accounts and their affiliates stop using the platform altogether. He's clearly not doing that, and thus his entire strategy to crouch the decision as some moral high ground completely falls apart. Furthermore, he never even explained what he found objectionable with Musk's comments, simply calling it not necessarily a positive one. Is that the bar the Walt Disney Company has? If that's the case, they should start firing a whole lot of their employees because the messages they have put into their shows are not positive at all. They are very damaging. And Bob Iger should probably start with himself, given the fact he was one of the top creative executives overseeing much of what the Walt Disney Company was putting out to audiences for their consumption. So that is what Bob Iger had to say. I think I kind of shared my thoughts on that. I think he's a snake in the grass, and he's pretty much just lying to people's faces and hoping that PR spin will pick up and that people will buy into this idea that he's somehow having his free speech limited when that's just not the case at all. But let me know what you guys think about this. Let me know what you make of what Bob Iger had to say here at the Deal Book Summit in New York City. Leave a comment below.